Next up, we have Raghav Mani from NVIDIA, Director of Digital Health Products and Platforms. He's going to talk about transforming digital health through AI agents. Thanks, Raghav.
Hi, folks. Really impressed at how well you're on time as you go through all these back-to-backs. I'll try to stick. Okay, I'm going to talk about digital health and how agents are transforming digital health. And digital health is a slightly nebulous term. It covers many, many different areas. So when I look at the types of use cases and the types of workflows where the agents are transforming digital health, it spans all the things that you see on the screen. Enhancing patient engagement through agents that can take care of patients, check in with patients ahead of the visit, during the visit, and after the visit. Automating clinical documentation, where a doctor and a patient are having a discussion, and then an agentic system is listening to the conversation behind the scenes and automatically creating a note, automatically extracting the clinical codes, doing a bunch of things behind the scenes for the physician, but also therefore improving the patient experience because the provider now has time to look at the patient rather than look at the screen. Third, improving clinical trials. Now, obviously, for this audience, this is a particularly useful use case. Imagine an agent that can automatically scan through hundreds of thousands or millions of patient records, look at the complex inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then figure out who are the patients that are likely good fits. You never are very sure if this is an absolute fit. You probably have to follow up with the patient. But imagine also even that being automated through an agentic system where the agent calls the patient, works through the history of the patient, collects more information to make sure that this patient is actually a match or not. All of that automated through agentic frameworks. Bunch of different back office functions are all perfect candidates for automating through agentic approaches. I won't get into the details. And ultimately, patient monitoring, taking care of patients outside of the walls of the clinic or the hospital. So that's the span of things that covers the opportunity for transformation through agentic approaches. Now, people use agents very fluidly. It almost sometimes means anything that is related to an AI model. I want to define what I mean by an agent. An agent is something where a user can request an action, and the agent will think about what it is that you're asking it to do. And it'll plan out a sequence of steps, and then execute those steps. And executing the steps may be using the internal knowledge in an LLM. It may be recognizing that I don't have enough internal knowledge in my own model. I have to use external tools for it. The external tools could be querying a database, doing a web search, using a calculator, using MATLAB, it could be any number of different things. But understanding when to use what tools, collecting the results back, summarizing it and reflecting on it to make sure that it actually makes sense, and then returning all of that back as an end product to the end user. So this is what I mean by an agentic system. And in reality, there could be multiple specialized agents that need to be orchestrated by an orchestrator agent. And I'm using an engineering example here. And an orchestrator agent could connect multiple agents, one that works on bug tracking, one that works on automatically generating code, and one that works on creating documentation. So there's like individual agents that are tasked with different tasks, but then you coordinate it all with an orchestrator agent. I want to play an example.
I'm James. I'm your appointment scheduling agent. Would you like to schedule a flu shot, physical, or something else?
I'd like to schedule a flu shot.
Flu shots are a great way to stay healthy. When are you thinking of coming in?
I have a business trip coming up, so how about the first week of November?
I see availabilities on Tuesday, November 5th at 9:30 a.m. and Thursday, November 7th at 1:30 p.m. Which option sounds good to you?
I can let it play on, but I'll pause it in the interest of time. But you can kind of see how an agent, in this case, that is embodied by an avatar, so that can talk to the patient, emote, and also answer questions and do work for the patient. So the three core technologies that are part of this kind of an implementation is one, the avatar itself, the digital human technology. Then there is the voice agent that can understand speech, transcribe it with high quality, and then synthesize speech back again when there's a response to be given back to the patient. And then the third, which is almost like the brains of the system, is the actual LLM and the further agentic systems underneath it. So those are, you can think of them as the three building blocks towards a use case like what I just showed. Now, these types of use cases are now being permeated across digital health, from avatars that can go check in on patients before the visit as well as post-visit check-in avatars. Ambient systems that can listen to the patient-doctor communication. You probably are familiar with this. You may have experienced this yourself when you go to a doctor's office. There are doctors now using these systems where they'll request your permission. Hey, I'm going to record this thing, and then it'll automatically create the note, and then that way I can listen to you and not look at my computer. And then there's, of course, systems that monitor facilities, monitor ORs, monitor patient rooms, and automatically detect things and raise alerts, and so on. Now, let me switch over to a different use case that is a little bit more closer to biopharma. Here, this represents something that we are releasing next week. It is a framework to build agents that can do deep research on your own proprietary data. Many of you probably are familiar with the deep research capabilities in ChatGPT and Perplexity, which are all excellent. If they work for you, you should use them. Now, if for some reason you need to have an implementation like that on your own data, that also can call your own custom tools. And I'll show an example of a custom tool here. Then we are giving you a reference implementation of how to do this yourself. And we call this Biomedical AI IQ Research Agent. So I'm going to play it. It's a relatively long video. Let's see how long I let it play. But I am coming in here. I'm going to use a particular reasoning model. And this is a demonstration example that's built into this, where we have a couple of curated data sets. One is a healthcare data set. And I'm going to ask some questions about cystic fibrosis. And I want the system to go do some research on cystic fibrosis. And I give it an overall template of what I want it to do. I want it to look at, do research on both my own proprietary data. And if that doesn't have enough information, I want it to go look out into web search tools. And here it has come up with a plan of what it is going to do. It's asking me, shall I go ahead and execute the plan? So I said, yes, go ahead, do it. And the reason for this two-step process is that this is a long process here. It's going to churn through, think about things, they use different tools. So it's useful to just review the plan before you execute it, given that the plan is going to take potentially minutes to hours to execute. So now it's looking through internal sources, and if it doesn't have enough information in internal sources, it'll look at external sources. In this particular instance, it's finding potential target proteins that are implicated in cystic fibrosis. It's also looking to see what other therapeutics have been explored, to see what other small molecules have been experimented so far. And then finally, it calls into a virtual screening pipeline it's a separate pipeline that we release, which is called a BioNeMo virtual screening pipeline, where given a target protein and a starting candidate molecule, it's a second agent almost. That agent will churn through and explore the chemical space to see what may be better molecules that can dock with that particular target protein and also have other good properties like ADME properties. And so in this particular example, this is a deep research tool that's finding information in literature, internal as well as external, and then has some ideas of what to experiment with. And then it actually calls this other virtual screening tool to do some more experimentation. It then brings all of those results back to the end user, summarizes it, and produces a report for you to then review. So you can imagine this as a real sort of efficiency boost for any of your researchers working in all of these areas. This is kind of the entire pipeline that I just described. So it starts off with you specifying the topic and what you want it to do, it creating a plan, executing the plan. In this case, it's doing something called a RAG search. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's a way by which agentic systems can query your own local databases. And then if it doesn't find enough information, it goes out to a web search. At the end of it, it summarizes. It reflects on the summary that it created to make sure that it's not hallucinating. And then it decides that, oh, I do need to do a virtual screening tool. So it actually does that as well. It looks to find the target protein's PDB files. It looks at the SMILE strings, and then executes the virtual screening pipeline, and then finally generates a summarized report. Now, building agentic systems like this is complicated. Without getting into every one of these boxes here, I'll just say it's complicated architecturally, making it enterprise grade, safety, security, all of those aspects. The way NVIDIA supports this is, of course, on the hardware layer, we build a bunch of hardware that makes all of these things go incredibly fast. On the software layer, we build what are called NIMs. We take the best open source large language models, we optimize them, and package them as Docker containers that you can spin up wherever you want. So all of these are basically foundation models for different use cases. Some of them are large language models, some of them are vision language models, some of them are domain-specific models, like a model that can do, AlphaFold is an example of a domain-specific NIM. And then there's another layer of software that we provide, which allows you to have a data flywheel where you can curate the data, customize your models, deploy it for production efficiently, gather new data, and then repeat the process again. So typically, you start here, you build a system, but to keep making it better, you need a flywheel like this, tools that enable you to implement something where you put out the system in the field, collect more data, and start the process again, and continuously do it. And that's what this layer represents. And then the last layer is what we call blueprints. Blueprints are basically examples of how to put all of these things together for specific use cases. And I already talked about NIMs. I'll skip. The main thing about NIMs is that, apologies for the formatting, they're incredibly efficient. So if you're taking a large language model like a Llama model, if you take it out of an open source repository and instead use the NIM is going to be like 2x higher throughput. So incredible cost savings. And then I talked about all the microservices for the data flywheel, so I'll skip over this as well. But here is the example of a blueprint where we take all of these underlying functionality and show you how to build a particular use case like that biomedical AI research agent that I just showed you. So this is the technical implementation of that. We make all of that source code be available on GitHub, so you can take it and adapt it to be whatever you want it to be. Okay, so again, key building blocks of the biomedical research blueprint that I just showed you was the language model that's at the left. And in this particular instance, it's using our top-of-the-line reasoning model called Llama Nemotron. And then it uses an incredibly fast retrieval augmented generation component, so saving you money. And then the last is there is a framework that we have called IQ, which helps you build agentic systems very efficiently. So those are the building blocks. Now, I've given you a lot of details here. You're not going to remember all of these things. What I would recommend is you check out build.nvidia.com. And this is where you can see all the models that we package as NIMs, all the blueprints that we put out there that showcase how these different underlying large language models can be combined together to create these different use cases. So I'll stop there in case there's time for 1 or 2 questions.
Yes, we do have some time. Any questions from the room? Milland, right there.
Hey, so it was a great presentation, good work being done on BioNemo. But one of the questions I have, though, I mean, video avatar technology is still super, super expensive, even if you couple that with compute reasoning for video imaging. $8 per 10-minute conversation versus 1 cent for a 10-minute conversation through pure text, right? Where is NVIDIA really innovating to be able to reduce those costs such that if you were to build this and deploy this at scale, say for even 100 patients, you would be looking at almost $1 billion investment just to get that off the ground?
Yeah, so you're talking like the avatars that can talk to the patient? That's what you're referring to?
Well, I've already built that already. So
okay.
I'm saying this is what we faced. Yes. We didn't use $1 billion, but it was up there.
Yeah. So definitely, it is the most complex and it's the highest compute footprint. And when you want to account for a certain amount of low latency, you need to have a certain amount of capacity always available. That also adds to the cost. One of the core things that we have been working on in general, I mean, we do constantly, our entire business model is around making things go faster. So we make things go faster in software, we make things go faster in hardware, and in hardware architecture. So hardware architecture, by that I mean CPU, GPU, networking, all of those things, entire system-wide optimization. So that's what we do all the time. So we expect compute to get cheaper and cheaper so that you can do more things. So that's just generally true. More specifically around large language models, and I don't think we have done it for VLMs yet, but for LLMs, certainly we have done this. It's a new toolkit that we have announced called Dynamo, and we are using it inside NIMs. Are you familiar with that one? Okay. So Dynamo, very quickly, I know we'll run out of time. Language models, inferencing large language models, you can think of it simplistically as just a monolithic thing, But if instead you break it apart and run some parts of optimizations on one machine and other parts of inference on another machine, you can make it go much, much faster. Simplistically, that's what Dynamo does, disaggregated LLM inference. So those are the kinds of things that I anticipate will continue to drive cost down. I mean, if you look at the total acceleration over the last 10 years or so, I think you have like a million-fold acceleration. So what was exorbitant 10 years back is nothing at this point. So I would expect that same pattern to play out over the next few years for the things that today are probably a little more price sensitive for you.
Yeah, I think it's just fascinating because particularly when you look at video imaging like gait performance, right, and using that for neurodegenerative disease detection, that's a fantastic place where this would do remarkable activity. And we've been working on this for the last 15 years, right? But it's still, the costs are just nowhere near respectable to actually launch a company, let alone an initiative on.
Those are the types of things that we love to work on, like things that are very hard to do. So yeah, we can chat more. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Raghav.